Most people know the phrase follow the money, but following the money is impossible when it comes to keeping track of US taxpayer dollars flowing through the Pentagon. We do know that more than half of the military budget goes to private defense contractors. At times, the number of private contractors has even outnumbered that of enlisted troops. This invisible army operates with little oversight and sometimes carrying out missions that government agencies are barred by law from carrying out themselves. If military spending isn't going to defense contractors, it's being wasted in staggering ways, like ordinary products charged at outrageous prices, or military construction projects costing billions that were never finished, never used, sometimes not even wanted. And this was especially relevant concerning US efforts in Afghanistan. And let's not forget about the F-35 jet program, in which US taxpayers will pay $1.7 trillion over the course of its operation, despite persistent failures since the program's launch in 2001. Even after all this time, half of these jets aren't even combat ready. And now, we've borrowed so much money to finance wars that interest payments on these debts now exceed the entire cost of our national defense spending, which amounts to trillions of dollars. But when the Pentagon continues to fail every single audit attempt, seemingly unfazed in its inability to account for billions of dollars, one must wonder, where is all of our taxpayer money really going? Enter the black budget world. The US military and intelligence agencies have billions of dollars worth of secret projects they don't want you to know about. These billions have funded a secret world of advanced science, technology, weapons, and various covert activities, which have always been shielded from congressional oversight and public scrutiny. Back in the 90s, members of the House Armed Services Committee once said that 70% of the black budget could be declassified at no risk to national security. Our taxpayer dollars are funding these black budget programs, and we have a right to know what we're paying for. So why the secrecy? What are these covert elements really hiding? This is why we're interviewing private pilot and military aerospace historian Michael Schratt, who's investigated top-secret advanced technologies buried deep within the military intelligence complex for over 25 years. He alleges to have first-hand experience with classified government black budget programs with access to former U.S. Air Force pilots, retired naval personnel, and former aerospace engineers with top-secret clearance. He's one of the leading authority voices in investigating government programs involving the recovery and study of off-world technology, also known as UAP UFO crash retrieval programs. He's author of Dark Files, which brings to life historically significant and credible UFO cases obtained from university archives, research centers, and private collections, using carefully reconstructed illustrations of the events. Most of these defense contractors working within these black budget programs are the same ones profiting from the current wars ravaging the world. And if these defense contractors possess hidden UFO UAP knowledge, if they have access to advanced technological and scientific breakthroughs that could radically transform society, there are legitimate concerns that these breakthroughs will be exploited and not used for humanitarian purposes. The implications are too profound to ignore. Let's investigate this matter further with Michael Schratt. Hello, everyone. I'm Amber Yang, director for wanttoknow.info and peers, and our news editor, Mark Bailey, is here in space.
Hi, everyone.
And we're so glad to be with you, Michael, to listen, learn, and help spread the important work you're doing to educate people about what's going on deep inside the military-industrial complex, from educating about the corruption and abuse that's happening, but also uncovering some of the most advanced technologies and its extraterrestrial influences. We're all here because we want to know. And we want to know what's going on deep within our system, programs that we pay for. And when the Pentagon says that there's been no evidence that the US has collected any off-world technology, government insiders and witnesses with high credibility say otherwise. So what's being kept hidden from us and why?
Very good question. Well, there is an entire black landscape that has been kept from the public. I'm going to give you a couple examples here. Obviously, we have a black budget. We have classified aircraft. We have black bases. Essentially, we're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar classified black world here. There's multiple programs going on. There are legacy programs that have never been declassified. In the Reagan administration, at least 12 man classified programs have not been declassified. We've got over 119 crash retrieval cases. To my knowledge, basically all of those have not been dislodged. So there's this document that you can request from the Library of Congress that they put out every year. And in this document, they list the programs, but a lot of these programs, they have no mention of the money spent on it. Those are the black programs, and those are the ones I like to focus in on.
Wow. Well, thank you for doing that work because even just trying to find any media article after 2015 about black budget programs is almost non-existent. It's hard to find information about this. I'm curious about what drew you to this field of work, of studying black budget programs and extraterrestrial UFO phenomena. What drew you to this work?
Nice question. Well, I've always had an interest in aviation. My father used to bring me to an air museum near Chicago. It was called the Victory Air Museum, and they had these old warbirds parked out in the field. And there was weeds growing through the wheel wells, and the paint was chipped, and the paint was faded, and the windshields were cracked, and it just had this ghostly aura about them. All these old World War II birds just sitting out there in the field. So from that point, my father used to take me to the Oshkosh Air Show, which is the largest air show in the world. Went there for 27 years straight, and then just started piecing these little puzzles together, interviewing engineers, interviewing test pilots, interviewing people who worked on classified programs at Air Force Plant 42. That led to the crash retrievals. And personally, I feel that that is going to be the vehicle for disclosure, because the crash retrievals have the bodies, the debris, and the craft all wrapped up into one thing. And so that's what this field needs to move forward.
Interesting. So,
Yep.
if you could declassify one technology developed under these
Right.
black budget programs, what would it be and why?
On January 28th, 1986, the Challenger exploded, and the United States Air Force lost what they called their assured access to space. Now, while all this is going on, concurrently, they had multiple Titan II booster failures at the same time. So really, the United States Air Force, they were out of business. They had no way for space access. So they put out a desperate call to the defense contractors, all the major defense contractors, and they said, we need for you to design for us a two-stage to orbit space plane that can be anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. And they did it. They did it. It's still under wraps to this day. It's called the Black Star program. It's this large mothership that has a cavity on the bottom of it for the release of a parasitic aircraft. And this thing can literally be anywhere in the world in less than 2 hours. It has a synthetic aperture radar on it. It can release small payloads. It's a manned program, because if there's something going on in the Mideast or there's something going on in Russia, they need to be able to get there immediately. And the problem we're running into is that satellites have these predictable orbits. And so let's just call it a nation of concern can track when this satellite flies over. But if you have a classified aircraft, you can get a pilot into that thing, you can take off, you can detach from the mothership, and then you just pour the coals to this thing, and you can be there on site, unannounced, on a surprise visit, and you can photograph and send in real time back to the intelligence agency. So CIA, NRO, NSA, they can all get the information in real time. I've done extensive research. I've interviewed people who have seen this in person. There are newspaper articles where people saw this thing flying overhead and they have a drawing of it there. I was able to commission my friends to do a full color 3D rendering of this. And then I took everything I learned from Aviation Week Space Technology. I took everything I learned from the witnesses that I interviewed who actually saw this. I spent weeks putting together a detailed 3-view drawing, and I sent that information all the way 9,000 miles to the Philippines and had them build me a really nice big scale model of this thing.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So that would be the Black Star program, would be one of the crown jewels of the military industrial complex that we all paid for. Everybody's paid for it, and they're not going to show it to anybody. They keep quiet about it.
Out of all the advanced technologies that we know about here on Earth, how many of those do you think were influenced by these ET tech that we reverse engineered or found in the crash retrieval programs?
I believe it's a two-pronged answer. The first prong is the good old-fashioned American ingenuity. You can track the legacy of the stealth technology. For instance, going from the Have Blue to the F-117, then you've got the F-22, you've got the F-35. You can track this legacy on how that took place. It was a Russian scientist that came up with the mathematical equations that predict radar cross signature return. It was a Russian scientist. And that was the beginning of the Have Blue program that led to the F-117. So you can see there's this historical lineage that this follows. However, getting to the crash retrievals, we've been spending billions of dollars in tax budget, funding. And from the 119 crash retrieval cases that we have, these legacy military firsthand witnesses are telling us that there absolutely is a UFO crash retrieval program ongoing. So there's a two-pronged front.
Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. Woo! Always feels like a mouthful to say that. Mellon released a screenshot from a conversation back in 2020 with allegedly a senior U.S. government official on Signal about a recovered UFO that landed in Kingman, Arizona in the 50s. And that this government official, he said in the Signal conversation that he knows who recovers the crashed or recovered UFOs, which authorities are involved, and also allegedly knew the Air Force gatekeepers. And I guess that's the individual or body of powers that decides who has the right clearance to know. So I'm curious your thoughts about that.
What they've done over the years here is that this particular subject is not necessarily classified, but it's proprietary. They have brought this out of the hands of the government and put it into privatized industry, like the main defense contractors. And so what they did long time ago, they figured this out a long time ago, 40s and 50s, when there was a crash retrieval, the government cut a dirty deal with the defense contractors. And they said that we don't care what you need to do. And you can privatize this, you can commercialize this, you can trickle the technology down, you can make billions in profits. All we want to know are two things. What is the propulsion system of these vehicles, and what is the weapons advancement technology associated with these vehicles? And that's the deal that the defense contractors cut with the government.
Did you get this information from an insider or someone who was a part of this agreement?
Well, there's something called the revolving door phenomenon. So let's just kind of role play this here a little bit. Let's say you're a defense contractor somewhere out in Air Force Plant 42 Palmdale, and you really want to get this multi-billion-dollar bomber contract. You'll talk to your high-level military brass at the Pentagon. He will grease the skids for this defense contractor and get him to get this contract. Now, when that same high-level military brass personnel retires, he is retained as a consultant by the very same contractor that got this contract. So you can see it's this revolving door phenomenon, and these guys scratch each other's back. They help each other, and that's what's been going on for decades now.
Right, right. Yeah, this is what we have tried to really get clear about what the deep state means. These unelected officials who play this leading role in national security decisions, having often a higher security clearance than the president, and shapes covertly behind the scenes
Absolutely.
with other corporate players. And now venture capitalists, all this whole revolving door between the Pentagon and the venture capitalist world as well. So I'm curious your thoughts about the Kingman landing.
Kingman, Arizona, 1953. This is in May 18th, 1953. Harry Drew used to be the world's premier researcher on this case. He's no longer with us. So all we have now is his legacy. And he mentioned that there were 3 bodies recovered, all alive. There was another body, human-like, being recovered for a grand total of 4. This thing was about 35 feet in diameter. It had a dome on top. There were ridges around the outer circumference of the craft itself. This was a forced landing, not necessarily a crash retrieval. There was a group of 40 engineers that left Phoenix, made a 3-hour drive up to Kingman. They got there at night, and the engineers left the bus according to their expertise. They eventually got this craft on an M25 tank transporter, got it on a barge across the Colorado River, and according to Harry Drew, it was sent to Area 51, which is where the story gets a little bit murky. But according to Harry Drew, it was sent to Area 51 prior to the U-2 spy plane test flights back in '55.
Michael, when I looked at your work, one thing that was really impressive was how you've brought a lot of these incidents to life with art. And
Right.
I just think that's so cool because it makes it much more approachable for an average person. You know, an average person reading a dusty old document, you know, they don't get too excited about it. But when they can actually see a rendering, like a high quality rendering of something based on all the descriptions you've got, that makes a big difference. So I just wanted to point that out.
Oh, thank you. That's great. That's been my goal this whole time. Taking these legacy crash retrieval firsthand military sources, taking their testimony, looking at it very carefully, and then working with my sketch artist, Rudy Gardet is my sketch artist. You know, we kind of rough this thing out according to the witness. We want to stay historically accurate. And then once we get that done, I have another artist that I work with. His name is Joel. And then we do a full color rendering to make these cases come alive. That's really the goal. And I've actually got the book here. This is the first book. This is a book called Magic Eyes Only, and this is by Ryan Wood. There's 100 crash retrieval cases in that book. The other book is the book by Leonard Stringfield. That's this book, UFO Crash Retrievals, 119 cases in there. So between these books, there's illustrations that I worked on. This has been a 3-year crusade to make these cases come alive so that we can see them visually. The criteria I used on a lot of these historical UFO cases is if there was a 3-page report, a drawing, sketch, or illustration, and then a flight path report. If it met that criteria, I went ahead and moved forward with a detailed drawing and a full color rendering. And that was the basis and criteria I use for a lot of my historical cases.
A lot of people have entered the UFO field, like Gary McKinnon, who was the computer hacker that was able to hack into the NASA system and see a folder where there were photoshopped photos where they actually took out UFOs, they airbrushed it out. But he hacked the systems because he wanted to see if there were any free energy technologies that covert elements within the government had. So I'm curious about any scientific breakthroughs or anything like medical breakthroughs. Are you aware of any technologies of that regard?
Personally, I believe it's across the board. They've made aerospace breakthroughs, they've made invisibility cloaking breakthroughs, they've made medical breakthroughs.
Handheld scanners that we can scan the body and determine what its condition, health, and also treat from the same scanner. Are these things real? Well, I can tell you personally that we've been working on them, and we have them. Cure cancer? Yes. Diagnose and cure. Technologies that can help get rid of the toxics, that can clean the air, that help get rid of the need for so much fossil fuel, or help it become more efficient.
If this technology was brought out overnight, you would doom the oil industry, you would doom the internal combustion industry, you would take out the coal-fired plants, you take out the nuclear power plants, you take out all the wind farms, you take out all the solar farms. A multi-trillion-dollar industry would be obsolete overnight if they release this technology.
I think it's kind of hilarious how we have like the F-35 jet program that's like fraught with failures, and the estimate is that it's going to cost taxpayers 1.7 trillion for the duration of the program, and a helmet is $400,000, and then more than half of the fighter jets aren't even ready for combat. So that's like the reality we see that does get covered in the media.
So what they do sometimes is they rob Peter to pay Paul. For example, if you have a classified Black Star program, what you would do is you would siphon off money from the A to Avenger 2 program and move it over to the Black Star program so that nobody knows. And that's how they hide these budgets. They steal from one program to fund another one. And that's kind of how they keep a lot of this under wraps.
So do you think that's what's going on with the F-35 program, that some of those funds are being diverted to these black budget programs?
There are a lot of programs that were born black, they died black, we'll never hear about it. I will also say that many times what we see kind of in the white world is a sacrificial lamb for another program behind the scenes. So like anytime you see a white world program, that might just be funding for something way in the back somewhere. Yep, that's the best way to answer that.
At your workshop about the black budget at Contact, you had a great visual of the 3 tiers of technology. Could you speak more on that?
Sure. Basically, when you talk about tier 1 technology, these are your ordinary garden variety vanilla flavored aircraft. These are your F-15s, your F-16s, your A-10s, things that kind of are in the industry, in the field right now, things that you would see at your local air show. This is your tier 1. Tier 2 programs are your somewhat recently declassified programs that were from the black world and now into the white world. These are your F-117 stealth fighters, your F-22s, your B-2s, your Boeing Phantom Works bird of prey. All at one time, these were absolutely black programs, and they have now been moved into the white world, and they're in the field now, or they're in museums. Now, tier 3, the aircraft that I like to focus on, are the classified, unacknowledged special access programs that kind of circumvent the Newtonian laws of physics. These are your Hudson Valley boomerangs, your Belgium triangles, your January 5th Southern Illinois triangles. These are the kind of craft that can depart like a spark on a grinding wheel and make no sonic boom long before Apollo 11. So that's your tier 3 aircraft.
After your presentation, I realized that what many people would see in the sky and say, wow, look at that UFO. Could it be aliens? It could be tier 3 technologies that the US military is experimenting on. Some allege that the infamous Tic Tac video was actually a reverse engineered craft made by humans. Have you looked into that at all?
What I believe is going on there is we have a blue on blue situation here. We have Americans chasing Americans. There's one witness that's come forward, was there. He believes that it's a man-made project by the defense contractors. I definitely agree with this because I've got cases back from 1967 in Wycombe, Pennsylvania, that has the same identical Tic Tac shape with prongs sticking up and spheres at the end of the prongs. Now, if you look at the high definition footage on the Tic Tac UAP, it also has these prongs coming on there. So you can see there's a legacy to this technology. It doesn't even need to be reverse engineered. It could be something that's just man-made completely. We don't want to underestimate the ingenuity of American engineers. Absolutely. I don't know if we need to put the ET card on it. Now, possibly it was a reverse engineered program, but if you look at the newspaper clippings, breakthrough was made October 1954. The newspaper clippings bear this out because they talk about cracking the gravity barrier. They talk about multiple defense contractors that are desperately trying to crack the gravity barrier. Universities were doing the same thing. This is all in the mid-1950s. And then a lot of this information went black. So personally, I believe they've made the breakthrough. They've got the technology.
And it's just a humbling reminder for all of us who want to know that whatever interesting UFO we see out there, it may or may not be connected to ETs. And it really just could be experimental, advanced military aircraft that they're testing.
Correct. And what they like to do, because what we're dealing with here is the varsity team. We're dealing with counterintelligence. We're dealing with the international intelligence community, the CIA, and what they like to do is they like to paint their own black aircraft programs with the ET brush. So they're happy. They love to think, they want everyone to think that these things are alien, they're ET technology. It is a great cover for their own deep black programs. They're brilliant at this. They would love to publish things at the supermarket checkout and have us all believe that it's ET technology, when in point of fact, it is our own classified black budget funding paid for by American taxpayers that are actually funding, designing, and fielding these aircraft.
Of these technologies in tier 3, do you think it could be like a situation like Philip Corso, head of the Foreign Technology Desk, who allegedly investigated the Roswell tech, that said that, everyday products like bulletproof vests, fiber optics, that they took elements from this ET tech and seeded it to American companies, and so it was like an integration of ET and human design?
Well done, well done. The research that's been done on Roswell clearly indicates that some of that debris was sent to Battelle Memorial Institute.
Mm.
They were looking at it. Battelle is a major player in it. This is the oldest defense contractor in the United States. So it makes sense that they would have a need to know. Some of that debris was sent to Battelle. Some of it was sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Foreign Technology Division. They looked at it. Many cases, they're trying to look at the material science. And after all these decades and billions of dollars, we would absolutely certainly hope that we got something for our funding. We would hope to think that.
You mentioned Area 51, and I know for a while Area 51, it was like considered to be a conspiracy, considered to not be real, and then eventually they came out and said yes, Area 51 was real. And I know that Area 51 is one of at least a handful of military bases that allegedly have these technologies, particularly ones that are connected to extraterrestrial technology.
When it comes to unacknowledged special access programs that the president can't get access to, what they like to do here in the military industrial complex, in the intelligence community, they like to diversify their portfolio. They're not going to put everything in one basket. Early on, the retrieved discs were sent to, back in the 40s and 50s, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Absolutely Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And that is still a primary area where they keep a lot of this. However, they also compartmentalize this information and they keep transferring assets from one facility to the next so that nobody knows the full story here. That's the ways that they keep this stuff classified. So we'll do a list here. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, for sure. Area 51, for sure. Tonopah Test Range, not too far from Area 51 in Nevada, for sure. You also have MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. You have Eglin Air Force Base, where a number of ET bodies were taken. This is according to Marion Black McMagruder, who saw the survivor of the Roswell incident, and he saw it in April of 1948. And we also have Dugway Proving Ground in Utah. These are the primary areas. Of course, Edwards Air Force Base, North Base. North Base is where they do a lot of the classified work. I've got multiple sources and references that there is, in point of fact, definitely an underground facility at Edwards, for sure.
If you could go to one military base to study what they have and somehow evade being attacked by the powers that be, which military base would you go to?
I think there only one comes to mind, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I mean, that has been ground zero for decades. There probably still is assets there. At one time, they had the Blue Room there. Curtis LeMay couldn't even go in there. Barry Goldwater did not get access there. So something was definitely there, probably 40s, 50s, 60s, up to the 70s. After that time, there's some information to indicate that a lot of the assets were moved and diversified to other locations. But if we could go back in time, let's say 1960 timeframe, I'm sure we would find a lot at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and probably to this day as well.
I believe that technological advancement is broadly good. I think it's totally beneficial to humanity, And yet there are ways that people use technology that are clearly harmful. With emerging technologies, that you're aware of, how would you ensure that the newest, most powerful technologies that are coming out would be more likely to be used to help people rather than to harm them?
Very good question. The best way to answer that is a statement that was made by Gordon Cooper, original Mercury 7 astronaut. He was a big proponent in declassifying technology, and he believes the way this could be handled properly is if the information is given to a united coalition of scientists and engineers, and then they release the information. That way we can have checks and balances, we can have independent confirmation, we can have repeatability, and we can have the scientific method used in these different technologies. That is the best vehicle for disclosure.
In a democracy, the decision on where to draw the line between the citizens' right to know,
Right.
and the government's national security obligations can be a fine line. So I'm curious where you draw the line, given the nature of your work and your studies.
I do believe that sources, means, and methods should be kept under wraps. However, there should be a sunset clause built into a lot of these programs. After 30 years, if there's no threat to the national security of the United States, a program should be declassified. Or if there's a 40-year time period, there's no threat to national security, they should be declassifying this stuff. They overclassify this. They lock this stuff up for decades and it never gets seen. They could probably declassify 40% of things that were procured under Reagan administration, and there'd be no threat to the nation. They could do it absolutely, but it's just such a monstrosity. There's so much paperwork involved. There's political things involved. There's personalities involved. And it's debatable with what if we'll ever get to see a lot of these programs. There definitely needs to be a united coalition of engineers and scientists that could look at this information, all of the information that we got from the crash retrievals and the technology. And we could have a team panel decide, would this be advantageous to declassify, or would it be more of a harmful threat? And if it passed that criteria, that information should be declassified. A lot of these crash retrievals, they're 70 years or older now. Do they really need to hold on to this? I can see what they've done, because they just stamped everything with a classification, USAB, top secret, cosmic top secret. At least 50% of our history has been lost and classified. We don't even know 50% of our history from World War II because they have literally stamped classified on so many millions of documents. We don't know if we're ever going to know our actual history. And that's why it's important for us to track down these legacy witnesses so that we can get the information that will lead to their bosses, which will eventually lead to the locations where they either had this information or have it now. So there should be some sunset clause, 20 or 30 years, and then mandatory declassification review.
I'm curious what your thoughts are about the UAP Disclosure Act, because it's really the clearest political legal path we've seen. And I know that New Paradigm Institute, Danny Sheehan and his team are working tirelessly to get Congress on board and to reinstate those provisions back into the 2025 NDAA. So any thoughts about that?
I have the highest hopes for a government type disclosure. However, we've kind of seen the track record here. They have tried 80 years to get this information out into the public domain using the democratic process, and it has failed us to this point. UAP disclosure provisions in place for the witnesses to come through, and then there was going to be another follow-on to that where this legislation would actually have some teeth to it, where we could subpoena these witnesses and we could get to their bosses, and then we would go into these facilities and get the bodies. Well, we know what happened. The defense contractors came in and paid off these politicians. So that's what we're up against. I don't know if I put up too much hope. I have hope that this could be, but I'm just concerned that when you're dealing with UFO crash retrieval hardware, bodies, disc type craft, propulsion system, weapons systems, it is buried so deep within the defense contractor proprietary world. I don't think that members of the United States government have a need to know, one, and number two, have the high enough security clearances to get access to this information. That's why personally, I feel it is imperative that we track down these legacy military witnesses to get their testimony before it's too late. And I still believe to this very day, and I believe Tom Carey will back this up with me, is that there are people in Roswell right now, as we speak this very minute, and we know that the civilian population got to the debris field, got to the crash scene before the military did. So there's people in Roswell right now that have parts of the debris. They have probably I-beams, they have the memory metal. That information has been handed down through the generations. And so we believe that there is still hardware and material in civilian hands in Roswell right now.
Speaking of Tom Carey, he wrote that book and featured the story of the 12-year-old schoolgirl, Frankie Dwyer, who allegedly saw that material you said where it turns into liquid at the firehouse
correct.
that her dad worked at, and she was
That's
threatened
correct.
by military police and said the desert's a big place out there, but 70
Well
years
done.
later, maybe.
Well
Right.
done.
If there's like a congressional hearing and they hold this thing up for the whole world to see, that might be an interesting image.
Uh-huh. Well, you can see what's happened here. We've got these witnesses coming forward, but they're onesies and twosies. Like we have David Grush come forward. Now, everything that he talked about, he heard about it secondhand. He did not have any firsthand knowledge of these. He didn't deal with hardware firsthand. He got it secondhand. What we need to do is we need to have firsthand military sources, current, not retired, but current, who have firsthand knowledge dealing with this.
The stakes are high with any of these technologies or secret programs being exposed. And so this UAP Disclosure Act is really a great way to document our efforts and show that we're not backing down. We, the people, want to know. So we've got all this like momentum, right? And I know it's mixed bag because of how classified these subjects are. So given your work and your fight and your effort to educate people about all of these classified subjects, what keeps you inspired to keep this work going?
I'm inspired by getting the drawings and illustrations done. I'm curious, just like everybody else. I want to know where my tax dollars have disappeared. I'd like to see what these craft look like, that these engineers and people who are on the retrieval teams, what did they actually see according to their accounts? These are the people who saw the bodies, or on the pathologist teams who actually did the autopsies. These are the people who loaded these craft onto 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I want to know what they know. What have they seen? What did they experience? Where was the information sent? What facilities around the government, around the United States, what repositories do they have where they've got the gun camera footage, the 8x10 glossy white, black and white photographs, all of the motion picture film reels. They've got warehouses of this. This is what we need to move this whole field forward.
Where can people find you to follow your work and stay updated?
Sure. You can find me on YouTube under my name, Michael Schratt. I've got all my things up there, all my illustrations, all my drawings, all my historical UFO cases, all of the crash retrieval drawings and illustrations. They're all up there.
Well, Michael, you are an inspiring force for good. And
Thank you. Appreciate
I
it.
definitely feel your integrity and your commitment to the truth.
Just really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. This has been really interesting.
I'm glad to be with both of you. It was great.